to order. If we could please start, if you would all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Gather stuff with one, too. Take it. No, I have my priorities. It's great to see so many of you tonight. Thank you for coming. Betty, if we could let the record reflect, please, that the board met in executive session to discuss matters leading to the appointment, employment, or promotion of a particular person or persons. We will move on to action item number 2, trustees, which is the approval of the minutes. If you saw your email, there were a couple of minor corrections to the minutes. If you did not, and anyone has any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have questions or comments? Please, Tim.
Yeah, just one clarification at the end, just before the last paragraph, where it says Trustee Madden said he agrees with the recommendation for administering the PSAT as outlined in Dr. Giarrizzo's memo. However, he'd like to know what the plan is for the students not taking the exam on that day. It's just as clarification, and I listened to the tape. It was I had asked whether Mr. Cousins had considered just administering it to juniors with other students having a regular school day, if that was part of, if that was under consideration at all. And then it follows in terms of everything else follows as it's.
Okay. Would you like to strike the sentence, however, he would like to know what the plan is for students doing the exam that day, and instead say?
He would like to know whether administrators considered still administering the exam to juniors while having other students have a regular school day.
Have a regular school day. Betty, are you? That's clear?
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended? Motion. A second? All in favor? Thank you all. We will now move on to the approval of the treasurer's reports. We have 2, the one for October and November. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Trustees, do you have questions or comments? Everyone's good? Great. All in favor? Thank you. We will move on to item 4, which is the report of the superintendent.
Great, thank you very much. Welcome back. Happy New Year to everybody. It's nice to see so many of you here tonight. Wanted to take a minute to welcome Mrs. Linda Binion, our Director of Counseling, and Mr. Cousins. I thought I saw you. Where are you? There you are. Mr. Cousins, our high school principal, who are here to present an update to the board on K-12 counseling. The work that's been done over the course of time since the initial review was done, the short-term progress that has been made since then, and the plans that we have for moving forward in the program. The presentation is less about post-secondary outcomes, really a lot about programming, so we'll try to keep our discussions focused on the counseling program. It has and will continue to be an area of focus for the district, and I want to thank Linda and her counseling team for their good and sustained and hard work, right? So it's when we met to go over this, it is important to put into context that how much has been done over the past 18 months, because that's really all it's been. So, so bravo and brava to you and your team. I'm excited for what's next, and we'll hear all about that. The 2019-20 calendar is will be presented to the board for action on January 24. We are getting lots of antsy calls about the calendar for next year. It's definitely coming. School is scheduled to tentatively open on September 4th. That's the Wednesday after Labor Day. I've included a second conference day on Election Day, as we did this year, and we have 3 snow days built into the calendar. So the other details are forthcoming. If the board has anything, any other input on that, just let me know. Our budget process continues, and we're now working to make reductions, and there are many to make. Simultaneously, our pre-bond work continues, and we'll be aiming to survey the community on priorities within the next 2 weeks. We'll be conducting community focus groups in February, and then we'll convene our bond steering committee, our bond advisory committee in between there, and we've invited our architects from CS Arch to be back in front of the full board on February 28th. So you'll have an update on where we are. Last week I had sent the board a document outlining our reserves. That's when I talked about it at the last meeting. It'll be posted to our website tomorrow, but since there was a question from Mr. Romano regarding the extent to which I've provided this information to him and the community, I'll provide it once again. But in summary, the district currently holds reserves as follows. We have a total reserves of $27,402,421.83. Of those reserves, the restricted reserves are $15,532,32.23. The LIPA glide path reserves are a total of $3,984,879.78. And then the assigned reserves, which include the money that the board and I use to offset the levy in the upcoming year, plus money that we have to reserve for encumbrances, and encumbrances are expenses that we know we have to pay in the upcoming school year, but the final services haven't been rendered, and so we carry that money over into the following school year. So when those purchase orders close out, the money exists from the pre-existing year to fund those purchase orders. So the total of that is $3,567,781.22. So of the most of that money is either assigned or restricted. We will put up a sort of an easy-to-read explanation of what each of those reserves are, what they are intended to be used for, the use schedule of them, how we plan to use them going forward, how we've used them in the past, and how they have been funded over the course of time. So are there any questions? We can talk about that, I guess, as old business, perhaps?
We can. I was going to point out that I thought the inclusion of how they get spent down even in the current year was very helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And lastly, our recruiting for a new assistant superintendent for instruction is underway. It was posted in the New York Times on Sunday. That screening process will begin within 2 weeks, and then we'll be engaging committees and key stakeholder groups in February. We're on track to bring the board finalists for consideration in early March. So that's all the news that's fit to speak. And
Thank you.
thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you. We next get to move on to the report from the SGO. Thank you, John.
Thank you. All right. Well, hello. I hope everyone had a happy, warm holidays. So, from where we left off, I think was right before concert season and the holiday season at the high school. The concert season went amazing for all the concerts, all the performing ensembles. If you missed them, I just learned that some of the ensembles are actually the ringtone or the holding tone for the district call number. So if you want to call and just listen to some of our concerts.
Beg to be put on
Just
hold,
call
you're
and
saying. Could
Yeah.
you
We'll
just
put you
me
on hold.
Call. And we'll put you on hold, yeah, or they'll put you on hold. But we had the high school held some really great events leading up to the holiday season. For example, the Magical Singers actually came around and did Christmas caroling to all the classes, and in the mornings, the morning before the break, the chamber orchestra and the Key Club combined and went to the Cohen's Children's Hospital to bring gifts and music to all the children. It's one of my favorite events of the year. I get to participate in it because I'm part of the chamber orchestra. We get to be conducted by kids who are members of the hospital or patients at the hospital. It's one of the greatest experiences. In addition to that, we also, moving after break, the very exciting robotics build season has begun, and if anybody follows that for the past few years, last year our team actually went to the World Champions in, I think it's St. Louis or Detroit. But this year we now have embarked on an 8-week journey to build a robot for this year's game, which is themed Deep Space, which basically involves picking up some kickballs and putting them into cargo bins, which is a lot harder than it sounds, I promise you, by building a robot from scratch. In addition, the senior play is also next week, next Friday and Saturday.
Great.
It is one of the funniest events of the year, and it is one of the most fun events to put on of the year. Luckily this year, actually Michael and I both have a chance to participate in it. If you want to come support our senior prom and come see Michael and I, and the rest of the cast, which is a lot of the senior class, we get to poke fun at some of the teachers and raise money. So that's next Friday and Saturday at night. You can buy tickets at the door. I think it's only like $5 or $10 to get in. In the athletic realm of our schools, we had winter sports go straight through winter break. Our track team is off to Yale tomorrow morning to compete in a meet there. Our wrestling team became conference champions just for this season. And then I guess last but definitely not least, for the SGO, we are continuing into the new year to work with CASA, and we are continuing to start our sports night preparations, which we pick our theme next week. So we're almost at the mid-year mark with midterms less than 2 weeks away. It feels like it was last meeting that I was saying that quarter one was ending, so now quarter two is ending. And that's it from me. So thanks, guys.
I think you might have overlooked, one of the roles you played in the winter concerts with the skit
Oh, yeah.
that they put on. There was a fabulous skit before the chamber orchestra
Yes.
concert in which they pretended to have a crisis and then produced a fantastic piece in which a typewriter, a manual typewriter, was used as the percussion instrument.
Yes.
And it was astonishing, and it's on Twitter, I think.
Yeah, the beginning.
Archangels retweeted?
I think the
It's
beginning
like
skit's on Dr. Drizzo's Twitter.
It's on your Twitter account.
So.
You really should see it. It was,
Fabulous.
it's fabulous
Thank
even
you.
on Twitter, but to be surprised by it in the moment of the concert was a wonderful moment. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I can't tell you, John, how many people asked me if I was coming that night, right? And I was like, yes, I'm going to be there. I was like, what's going on? They're like, and when I saw Mrs. Rodriguez, I was like, what's going on? She said, just, you're going, right? I said, I'm definitely going to be there. I'm glad I was.
Me too. All right. Thank you.
It was a wonderful moment, and it was tremendously authentic and originated with the students themselves, and I will leave it at that, and you can go find the clip online. Thank you, John. Okay, we are going to move on to regular business. We have 2 items for discussion. Discussion A is elections in schools, and I think Dr. Giarrizzo has an update for us. This has been brought up by the community previously, and the board put on the agenda for discussion. Since then, I think there's been some additional research, so I'm going to let you address that.
Right, absolutely. So, thank you. So I had met with a group of parents, fall, perhaps, early fall, asking me to consider the feasibility of removing the annual school board and budget election from the actual schools. So we had We had
And
s-
you're talking, in this instance.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is hard to hear.
Yep.
In this instance, you're talking specifically about our election in May on the budget vote and the trustees.
Right, so our schools are used for the general election, primary elections. The schools are identified by the Nassau County Board of Elections, and we don't have any control over their use. They say they're coming, and that's kind of the end of it. We also hold the annual school budget and trustee election in the high school, at the high school every year. So the question came up around would I bring forward to the board a recommendation to move that election out of the high school and into an off-site location, okay? And so when I had met with some folks in the spring, I had asked to understand how it worked here and at least get through a spring election, see how it was set up, how it all functioned, and that I would come back to it in the fall. The board, this came up at a board meeting a few weeks ago. We took the time with our attorneys to do some research on can this be done, and if it can be done, how it can be done. And so we did get feedback that it indeed cannot be done as a result of Education Law Section 2002, Paragraph 1, directs that the school budget vote, annual election, trustee election must be held in a school. And if the only way to not make it, the only way not to have it in a school is if the school is not accessible or adequate. And so we don't have the board doesn't have the option to move the election from a school off
Okay.
to a site. It'd have to be in one of our schools. So then we
And
would have to
this is-
discuss which is the best option of the 5 schools.
So this is a result, to be clear, that the specific election in May that we hold is governed by state education law. It's not governed by state Board of Election laws, which makes
Correct.
the election unique. And the law specifically says we have to hold it in a school building. It doesn't say
Where? Which?
It says it has to be accessible.
Mm-hmm. Adequate and accessible.
And so so you're saying we can still discuss which school is most appropriate
Correct.
for us in terms of whatever criteria, including,
That's absolutely
Safety.
correct. Yes.
do you have thoughts on that?
So of the 5 schools, in looking at our analysis of the situationality, the high school is probably the best location to have the annual election, simply because it is really the only school where we can have secure entrance and lock access to the main school. All the other schools have a little bit more porosity about them. And we can go through all of them and talk about them for sure. But the high school is probably, of the 5 schools, the high school is probably the best, most central location for the election.
And because I'm sure it's gonna come up too, with regard to the other elections, our best hope is still getting that pending legislation passed
Mm-hmm.
that gives school districts more of a say with the County
Correct.
Board of Elections, because thus far, our efforts have fallen on deaf ears.
Right, so we know of one district, at least I'm aware of one district, where the district petitioned the Board of Elections to move the site, but they moved it to a school within their district that was vacant.
We don't have one.
We don't have that. Yeah, we don't have that.
Okay, okay. Trustees, other questions or comments about this, or are we all? Yeah, I mean, I do think this is a complicated issue with elections in general, that school elections are governed by this separate set of laws. But,
I would be in favor of certainly using the high school, I think, because you can, the ability to secure it. I also think you have the advantage of a major parking lot that you can control traffic and parking during that whole process. So that gives us another
It's
issue
all
that
on one level.
addresses safety
Let
and
people park.
people having the opportunity to vote.
Derek?
I don't want to speak for anybody, but I think one of the issues with having the general elections, the primaries, the special elections, et cetera, for the community is that we take a lot of steps to control access of our buildings to prevent people who don't belong there from being there. And of course, we all support people coming to vote and participating in our civic processes. But of course, there's a mixing. Are there things we can do here or that you've put in place to continue to kind of segregate the voting population from the school population? Or that we could study that to ameliorate the situation a little bit?
For which or all?
That if we determine that the high school is the best place, and it seems like that probably is the consensus, because we do want people to understand the repetition of voting. We moved our meetings here as opposed to moving from building to building because it was confusing for the community to even keep track of that. So to keep track of where the voting is could also prove problematic. But the physical nature of this building, when people go into that athletic area to vote,
Right.
can be
Can be
separated
cordoned off.
Can be cordoned off.
Absolutely.
So there are things we can do to take steps to prevent the intermingling of our student population with the general public in that event?
Absolutely. And that currently happens. So we have security at, we have a monitor security. At least last spring, we had someone sitting at that door at the far end, so they couldn't get into the cafeteria side of the building. And then we had coverage on the front, the entrance to the athletic, the main doors to the athletic area. So of the, of the 5 schools at the, if you, all of them are going to require being in the gym for the most part. And in all cases, it's hard, it's much more complicated and much more difficult to seal that part of the school off from the rest of the school. When we have when we have primary elections and general elections, we put quite a bit of additional security on now, but it's not perfect.
Anybody else have things they want to discuss on that? I think we have, I'm just trying to decide. I'm taking a brief pause. I'm thinking about how to go from here because it's an important issue
I think it's an important issue. I was
to a lot of people, and I was
gonna
just
suggest,
mulling it in my mind. Go ahead, please.
I think you do have to have some rules about a lot of this, but I think given the conversation, I know other people in the audience, if you just want to make it clear, I'll send comments from the public too.
Yeah, I was considering that too, because I think it's something people feel strongly about and that we had on the agenda, and I was thinking, I'm with you. I'll make the motion then. I would like to make a motion to add a public comment section now, because I feel like we have people from the community that are concerned about it. Do I have a second?
On this particular issue, not an open public comments, let's be clear.
I would agree, because we're gonna have a lot
Oh.
more stuff. I would say, yes, I would make a motion. I will make a motion to open public comment for people that wish to specifically discuss
Address this issue of
elections in schools.
I will
Yes.
second that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? All right, we will now, big surprise. We always bury the lead, right? We will now open public comment to people that wish to discuss the issue of elections in our schools. If you have not been here before, or if you have and you're clear, you should, if you have a comment you'd like to share with the board, if you would kindly approach the podium and address your comments to the board, we would request your name and your town of residence. Thank you.
Good? Sound good, all right. Thank you for bringing this topic up for discussion and doing the research into it. I guess first question, Dr. Giarrizzo, it's first I've heard of the education law that you referenced. Can you explain that one more time, exactly what the law is saying and what's permitted in it?
Yes. I mean, we have it and we can, if we don't have it on us, we can
I've got it.
get
I've got
it
it.
to you.
I've got it. No,
I was
I've got
like,
it. It's, we can't, it's privilege. We can't.
While he looks, I will recap in a nutshell.
Here it is. Go ahead. Do you want it?
Oh, hope it's in a minute. Oh, yeah, you're right. All right, so the quote is,
It's here.
you're just saying just that part? All right. From the legal memo, it says, ensured the board must designate one of its schoolhouses as the polling place for the annual district meeting, which is the May meeting, unless there are no facilities deemed to be accessible or adequate. The law is clear that the determination of accessibility and adequacy lies with the board. But those are the only
Okay.
criteria we are designated. There's a quote from the law. Right. If the schoolhouse, and the law is apparently not new, if the schoolhouse shall not be accessible or adequate, then the annual meeting and election shall be held at such places we can determine. If
Okay.
we have more than one schoolhouse, we can designate which of those.
All right. So sorry, what section of the law was it again? I know you mentioned it before. 2002.
2002, paragraph 1.
Paragraph
1.
1, thank you. Okay, so I guess two questions, and it may not be able to be answered without the law specifically, but does schoolhouse refer to a school building or a school-owned property? And I think that's important as we have other facilities in the district, specifically the transportation facility, which may be serve as an alternative to a school that's occupied by staff and students. The second, as you point out in that specific memo, is that adequate really is, as you said, at the discretion of the board. And while it may be adequate as it's a nice open space and parking's great and all the other things that make it an adequate space for many things, and specifically an election, one would argue that it's not adequate because it risks the safety of the students and staff in the building. And I think the main point of consideration is that you, as a board, as administration, have done so much for security in the past year and considered so many things and continue to, that when an election comes, we open up the building and disregard, whether intentional or not, all of those things we've done. While there's superintendents that have spoken on this issue, and just to give you one, Rockville Center superintendent says we can't figure out how to have large number of voters come into our buildings and maintain a safe environment for our children. So while the intention is all there, it's almost impossible to do what you would do on a regular day. We check IDs for everybody that comes in the building. We have visitor management systems that you also greatly put into our buildings that now we can't use on an election day because you're not checking IDs at an election. And I get the sentiment and the sense that we can segregate, but we can only do so much. So I think it goes back to the adequacy of the site, and if the site is not adequate, we should find somewhere else. And I guess the real question to you as a board is, the first question is, do you believe our schools should house elections? And if you do, then it's almost a non-discussion. at this forum. But if you don't, then I think the question is, what do we do? And one, I would strongly argue that our schools are not adequate for it. No school is adequate for it. And I would say we need to find our alternatives, either location, or in a worst case scenario, which is not my idea, is close the school on election days. We don't feel that anybody should be there. So while we can't have it there, the school can be closed, although nobody wants that. But I would also say there are other schools that don't have their board and budget elections in their facility. New Hyde Park specifically doesn't, and they have it at I'll give you the exact name, but it's a community center within their town. And we also have community centers in our town that are adequate. So I guess the first question is, do you believe we should have elections in schools? And then I think we should take it from there as, all right, if we're all on the same page that we don't, how do we enact a change?
Thank you. I think we all really appreciate the work that a lot of people in the community have put into this issue, into researching it, into looking at what the facts are and what other communities are doing, and that has been tremendously important. I think there's no question that the board and the administration is concerned about the safety of elections in general and has worked hard with regard to the calendar to make sure it's as safe as possible, to deal with whatever the county board of elections has decreed will be the case, and to provide what security we can around that, and to be thoughtful about which buildings our own elections are in. I think our concern is evident too in having LAC try to work on the legislative solution, which gives us much more leverage with the county board of elections. That being said, I think we're all very open to ways we can continue to improve those processes while keeping elections as open and as accessible as possible too. We certainly are invested in people being able to vote while we protect our students. So I don't think we are finished, but I think this is the information that we have now, and we have to keep working on all of these angles. Did I?
Yeah. Can I respond? That'd be all right.
Yes.
Thank
I mean,
you.
it's not a forum designed for back and forth.
I can wait online if there's
But
others
I know
that
it's
want to.
important, so yes.
Yeah, I think LAC is important, and especially in this regard. And I think the federal, state, and local elections needs to be addressed in a broader group, and LAC spearheading that with other districts, with other politicians. Because the law is very restrictive there, very different from the board and budget election. And you know, for everybody's benefit, there's been legislation talked about for a number of years to change that. And while it's hopeful there's momentum now, because there's been legislation
I think
introduced this year,
We are feeling more hopeful, but
Right.
we need to do the work.
I don't think if we feel that safety at elections is a concern for us, we can wait for that to happen. And I think, not to bring New Hyde Park up again, they refused to have their elections, not their own elections. They refused to have this September election in their district, and they were successful. And it ultimately goes back to you guys of whether you want
And
the elections
I
in schools or
thought-
not, and how we can take a stand.
I thought the New Hyde Park was a good point. I made a note. I think we should reach out to them and follow up more on that. And
Trustee
on-
Jones, I think Mr. Gablicki just pulled up an article. I think the new Hyde Park was a primary election, not a Board of Education election. or budget
absolutely.
But
vote.
nonetheless,
There-
it's,
But we'll look into it.
We
But
should-
it
we'll
may,
look at it.
I just want to point out that
That's
we'll,
what it is.
we'll do further research into it and see exactly what it was and how that was
great,
accomplished.
thank you.
To further clarify that, the board and budget election in New Hyde Park have for many years been in a location outside the school district. What Mr. Galecki is bringing up is the primary election this year, where they fought it and they argued and they were successful to move that election out of their district.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for all of your efforts and for the information. We appreciate it. Public comment on elections is still open.
Rob Mazzella, Glenhead. Just one thing that is within the board's control with respect to trying to minimize the number of election-related events happening at the schools would be off-cycle school-related elections. Is that something that you would consider?
I'm so sorry, I'm just not.
So
can you
off-cycle
restate that?
school-related elections.
Off-cycle, thank
So
you.
things that don't happen at the time of the budget vote. So if there's a bond or a purchase or sale of a land or a new reserve funds being established that you want to vote on away from the date of the budget vote, it's just another opportunity for, conceivably, for something to happen. If I'm assuming the board could vote to require all elections to happen at the time, all school-related elections to happen at the time of the school budget vote. It would also cut down on expenses related to extra elections. So I don't know what that is, but it's probably a decent amount of money. Just want to know your thoughts on that.
The board has not had that conversation. It could well come up when we talk about the next bond vote, but I can't speak on, I don't have the board's opinion to give to you on that. So can't pull the board in public comment.
Okay.
But we hear you, and we appreciate the comment.
Hi, my name is Allie Ciampa. I'm a parent in the Seacliff School. I just moved to Glenhead, though. Thank you so much. It is such a scary time. It truly is. It's unbelievable to me that you know, the thought of something happening, but unfortunately, things are so contentious in this day and age, and the concern for our children's well-being is overwhelming on a daily basis, and then now with this heated political climate, it's scary. Just our village election in Seacliff held at the garbage facility or the recycling facility was contentious. There were grown adults in arguments with each other at our village election last spring. On that note, I think it's great to be proactive. I love hearing all these changes. I am curious. My children have said to me, the gym areas during the votes, whether it's a budget vote or the primary vote, there's the curtain, there's the folded accordion pleated one here in the high school. My kids have had gym class behind the curtain on election days. My son didn't this year. I realize there's probably been small changes. Is there any reassurance that the kids are not? My oldest, who's in high school, has been behind the curtain during budget votes. I realize if there's a gym day, are there alternatives being made to really keep the kids even physically outside of the gym now? Has that come up at all?
It's been resolved.
It's been resolved within, yeah, no, my son had said it was like within the past year or so. They sprung this on me as I was leaving tonight. It was lovely way to get here. I could have run here by myself. And then my other thought is, I realize for a budget election, you want people in the school. You want people to vote for the budget and come to the school. I truly feel there's a way what was the word that I keep using? What do people do to convince the 18-year-olds to get involved and to vote by saying it's not here in the school. If we can try to move it, if we do it when the kids aren't in school, we try to do something to almost encourage them that we are working for their safety. And it really might inspire some young voters who would not even consider to get involved in elections when they are able to do it, in a primary, in a budget vote, things like that. I think it can be used as a great opportunity, I think, to encourage people. I don't think it would be devastating. I think people would come out and vote if it was changed, and if it was changed with people understanding that it's really just being done to be proactive for the safety of the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments on elections in schools?
Hi, I'm Pooja Vera, Seacliff, kids in Seacliff School. Thank you so much for holding the meeting and hearing everyone's thoughts. As you probably know, most of the parents, we would love to see the elections out of the buildings. I think you guys also, with so many who have children in the schools, understand the safety issue. I thought the Clutters brought up a really good point that if they have to be on a different part of the property of school, like they don't have to be actually in a school, but if there is a different facility that we own as a property, I don't know if that's an available option, but that would be something I know I would be very interested in hearing if there are options available in that sense. I don't know if we have like a transportation facility or something like that that we could look into. Just to move them out of the schools, I think would be so key. I hate the idea of closing schools on election day, but for their safety it makes sense. But for this kids to miss school when they're not even voting is also really frustrating. It's like another day that comes out of their cycle that gets added to the schedule and prolongs things. So like whatever we can do to keep them out would be huge. So just wanted to let you guys know that as a member of the community, I strongly feel like we should move these out in any way we can. Thank you.
Other further public comment on elections in the schools? Okay. We are going to close public comment on this issue, and we're going to move on to discussion item B, which is going to be our report on K through 12 counseling. Thank you, administrators, for coming tonight and doing this for us.
I'm so short. Good evening. I'm very happy, actually, to have an opportunity to talk with you tonight about something that I am really passionate about, and it's our students, and it's the school counseling program. And I know everybody gets up here and says, I'm the luckiest principal, I'm the luckiest director, but I think I'm the luckiest director because the families that I work with, the counselors that I work with, and the educators are truly the best. And tonight, I'm really happy to share with you the work that we've been doing over the last 18 months to develop a comprehensive counseling program that we can all be proud of. And I may be the face of the department speaking with you tonight, but I do want to publicly thank the team of counselors and clerical staff I work with at middle and high school, as well as the administrators we work with to ensure that we really do have a good program. And they work just as hard as I do. As we go through the presentation tonight, I want everyone to kind of think about this as a journey. We actually know as the counseling department what our final destination is. We have a map, which I'm going to show you in a little bit, and we know where we're headed. And we also know along the way that we're going to uncover some great successes, and we already have. We're going to take some exits along the way and maybe discover new opportunities for kids. And we also know that sometimes in a journey you might get a flat tire and might have to back up and say, how do we reflect upon this and do this better? So for us, it's really a journey. And as I think about a journey, it really is about the betterment of our program because our students and our families deserve that. So when I think about a journey, I want everyone to go way, way back to your high school days and think about what it was like working with your guidance counselor in high school. Did you see them? Did you know who they were? Did they ever help you? Here's the hardest question of all, and the absolute worst day of your life. Would you show up in that office if you needed emotional support? Now, I've done workshops on counseling models before, many times, hundreds of people, and it's always interesting to me that when you ask people that are mid-30s, 40s, or older about their experiences with their counselors, and once I did it on cell phone and I had them text in the word, it usually was not positive. And the words we got were like absent, or who were they, or I would never go there. They were not really positive words. And there's a reason for that. And that's because when the field of guidance counseling started, it really kind of took off during the space age in the 70s, when we had to get a lot of students into math science programs. And to do that, you needed a college advisor or a guidance counselor to do that. They were often not trained in counseling. They might have been a teacher on a special assignment, that this is your duty to complete the college applications. So the perceptions of adults who might be 30s, 40s, and older of guidance counseling is very different than what school counseling looks today. And that's why, as we go through the presentation tonight, you're going to hear me use the word school counselor and not guidance counselor. So I'm really happy to tell you that the days of guidance counseling are gone. And when we had guidance counselors, there were no standards or models to follow. They might not have been, as I said, certified counselors. Looks very different today. And I'm really happy to tell you that North Shore is well on its way to actually making a transition from guidance counseling to school counseling. So we've also come a long way since 2016. In 2016, we know that the counseling department had a review completed, and many of you may remember that. And what came out of that were a couple different things. One was there were some things that were going very well, and we wanted to continue those activities and programs. But there also were several recommendations that came about as the result of this review. When you look at the screen, you'll actually see that items in green have been completed over the course of the last 18 months, 2 years. And there's one item in there in yellow. And you might be thinking, why is that still there and why is that not completed? And that's because I actually think we're doing it better than the recommendation was, and it actually is completed, but in a different way. So I think the recommendation references senior family night. And we've decided to approach that a little bit differently by providing all of our juniors, parents, and students with a one-on-one meeting with their counselor. That's about an hour and a half in length, so that they receive very individualized service in terms of what it is that they need in the college admissions process, because it is a very individualized process. So we're really proud of the work that we've done to work on the recommendations of the audit, but we're also ready to turn the page and start a new journey, which is working towards a complete transformation from guidance counselor to school counselor. Now, I told you how the field of guidance counseling developed, and it really didn't have a lot of standards or models to follow at the time it originally was introduced, and that has really changed. In 2002, the American School Counseling Association, you may hear me call it ASCA through the course of the presentation, said, we really need to transition from what was a service model to a program model. Now, a service is, I just called the plumber to fix the leaky faucet. He came in, fixed the leaky faucet because I called, and left, right? He didn't check all my faucets. He didn't check my neighbors. He just fixed what I asked and left. And that's very much what a guidance program was like. It was a service at the time of guidance counselors. And you'll notice now that what we're really doing is working on a program model. Now, when you have a program model in counseling, what that means is we are looking to provide equitable service to all students, and we no longer are waiting for you to ask for something. We are delivering a service to everybody based on need, based on data. Looks very different, doesn't it? There's more than 4 differences between a guidance counselor and a school counselor. I want to tell you that. But for the purposes of the presentation today, you're going to see evidence really from these 4 areas. The little picture up there, throughout the presentation, you're going to see our counselors and students in action. And what I love about that picture is that's probably her least favorite picture of Miss Nelson at the pep rally. Our counselors were really striving to have them out in the buildings, active. You should be seeing them everywhere and involved with students. Otherwise, we're a guidance counselor. This is our final destination. Kind of looks confusing. It's the ASCA model for counseling, and it's a national model that we began training our school counselors in last spring. And before I really get to the activities and programs and some of the changes we've made, I thought it was important for you to see the model so that you know where we're headed and what we're working towards. When I introduced the ASCA model, The counselors were really excited, and this was last spring, and I said, you know what, there's also something called RAMP. So on our journey, we're going to take a RAMP. RAMP is a recognized ASCA model program, and that means that you have the artifacts and the evidence that you produce to a national board that says, you know what, you actually are implementing the ASCA model with fidelity. And we got so excited about that, they said, we're going to ramp it up. And I said, yes, we are. And RAMP is really important, not for an award, although everybody likes that. It's really important because it means we're meeting the needs of all of our students. But I want to quickly go through and explain the model to you before we really delve into the work that we do each and every day, and so that you can see some of the changes and how it really aligns to the national model. I could train in the ASCA model all day. Nobody wants to be here all night, and that's not the purpose of the meeting. So I'm going to go kind of quickly and really highlight, I think, some of the key components. When you look at the model, we're looking at the black and white diamond up there. On the bottom, you'll notice it's 3 tiers. On the bottom is our foundational system, much like a house. The second tier are management and delivery systems, and the third tier is our accountability system. So just very quickly, the foundation is based on national standards, same as every other academic discipline in the district. Counselors also have standards. But it's also based on our own beliefs and philosophy, and based on something called 3 domains. Counselors are supposed to be working in the field of academic, which we all understand that. We all understand college and career. And they also work on social emotional wellness. And the model kind of helps us keep balance between all 3, because you can't be all social emotional and not college and career, or vice versa. You have to strive for that balance. The delivery system is our way of providing services to make sure that all students have assured experiences. It shouldn't matter who your counselor is, what your program or counseling service looks like. So how do we deliver that? And it looks very different. It works in, many people probably have heard about response to intervention, and it works in a very similar format. We should have a curriculum that we provide to all students, and you're going to see some of that later. And we should also have programs for small groups and individuals who might need more intensive or responsive services, and I hope never, but maybe even a response to a crisis situation. The management system really includes things like advisory councils. Are we working with outside providers and people within the building to help make sure that we are meeting student needs and that we're really being strategic in our plan? The management system includes a lot of things that you're going to see evidence of later, such as use of time and delivery of services. If we are not, as a counseling department, very strategic in the programs we offer, then I always like to say those are called random acts of guidance. We just do it because we like it or we don't know to do anything else. And that is not what our program is. It is really very much based on student needs and data. The accountability portion really looks at things like gap closing measures. So in a counseling program, are the services we're providing meeting the needs of all students? Is there a certain subgroup that is not being as successful in the post-secondary planning that maybe we need to look at something different there? That is probably the quickest explanation of the ASCA model I've given ever. But what I want to do is kind of walk you through, because as we go through the changes we've made, you're going to start to see evidence of the ASCA model falling in place. So at the end of 10 weeks, one of the things we do as a department is we reflect frequently. Are we doing a good job? Are we having the right programs? Are people showing up? Are we seeing more traffic? There's a lot of things that we look at. This slide really surprised me, because an ASCA model program, as I said, really you're pushing services out. We're meeting with kids frequently. We're meeting them where they are. We're meeting them in classrooms. We're meeting them in hallways. But when we sat down at the end of 10 weeks as a high school department, one word came out, and we're like, tired. And when we really looked at it, it was such good work. You can see from the slide that our counselors We're really out there interacting with students. And in a 10-week period, we had small and large groups with every single grade level at the high school. Some of them even 3 times with our freshmen, and I'm going to show you some of those activities in a little bit. But in addition to that, and that whole concept of sharing information as a counseling department, we really have increased the types of communication that we provide. There's a few things on here I'm not going to talk about. We are pretty active on Twitter, which some people do use. And we also have a counseling app. And I didn't want to show you the counseling app because we're actually transitioning from one platform, which I think is a little hard to use, and having it placed in the iTunes store in the next month or 2, which will be easier to use. So what I'd like to do is kind of share with you some of what we are doing to increase awareness and knowledge amongst our families. So last year we put an interactive monthly newsletter in place. And on the screen on the left, you can see a portion of that. And what you'll notice is our newsletters also follow the ASCA model in the 3 domains. So you're not only going to read college and career readiness on there, you're also going to see information pertaining to mental health or behavioral needs. And this particular one, I think it's early decision, early action, and then there's this story about juuling and what parents need to know. Now, I frequently do parent presentations in the evening, and I reference the newsletter. It does seem to be something that our families do use, and there's a tracker associated with it, and it's really kind of cool because it tells me where in the world they open it, and sometimes it's in another country, and I just think that's fun. But it also tells me the number of times that people view it. Now, our least viewed newsletter was over a holiday, and there were 375 views. Our highest was almost 900. So I know that people are going in and reading that, and I really like that, and we archive those newsletters on our webpage for families to use later. On the right of that, you see a similar newsletter. And this newsletter pertains to a college trip that I took in the summer, where when I left, I took some pictures and shared information about 3 colleges in Tennessee. Now, our school counselors at the high school level will visit colleges frequently. They all will take trips, and I want to talk about that in a minute. And one of my expectations is that when they come back this year, they will do the same, because we want to build a repository of colleges that we do visit to share with our families when they want on the website. Right now, you don't see that as a specific link, but we will make it one once our counselors come back in the spring. One of the things I've really been working on with them is getting out of that eastern corridor. And this year we are going to Colorado, Texas, getting them to some different locations. Next year we're really excited because we're beginning to see more of an increase in students applying to international colleges. So last year we had we actually have a few students right now in London and I think Edinburgh, Canada, and this year we've noticed some students applying to Australia. So the trend in college admissions, for a range of reasons, which I don't want to get into all of them now, but there is a trend in students here and across the country that are really looking at international schools. So we're looking next year at trying some of those opportunities to get our counselors even a little further away, which right now we're targeting California, Canada, and perhaps even something overseas to bring those back as well. Now, this is our webpage, a silly thing to put up there, but I really want to highlight a few things on the webpage because these were things that came out of the review and things that our parents really wanted to see. So one of the problems we have in a school counseling department, or really any industry, is that a lot of times we send things to you and it's probably not the right time because developmentally we're all different. And I might be ready for that in 9th grade and I want to work ahead and see what it looks like in 10th or 11th grade. But you might actually be not ready for that and you want to look at it at the precise time we send it or later. So we got a little creative with our website, and you'll notice our website actually follows the ASCA model too, in that we have both academic, college and career, and mental health resources on there. And I want to just highlight a few tabs because most of them are self-explanatory, but a few of them I think are really nice tools for families to use. So when you look at it, it does say 9th grade, 10th grade, 12th grade. I know 11 is missing. I just haven't finished it yet, and I'll get it up there soon. But when you look at that, what I love about that is those are interactive timelines for college admissions. So if I'm a 9th grader and I'm thinking, I'm ready for it, the counselors have talked to me about certain things, and I actually want to go in and work on it, I can. So I would go in, and if I'm looking at the 9th grade link, it says something about building, it's time to build your activity resume. You click on the link, and there's the form that we use, and you can get started on that. Now, you might be a senior, and you're looking, and you're thinking, oh, financial aid. You click on the link, and it'll take you directly to the website that you need and give you the information that you need. Now, we do mail these home, but I really want to be clear that these do not replace meetings with our school counselor. Counselors still do meet with students. It's just that it's hard to remember everything that is happening, and then they have that as a tool to go back to. You do not see 8th grade on here. We actually do have an 8th grade timeline as well, but we're looking at the high school site right now. A few other points of interest that may not make a lot of sense when you just look at the tab is that we do have a North Shore, I think it's NSHS, college contacts. We actually really did call over 200 schools to find out who our specific point of contact is at the college, what their email address is, and what their telephone number is, because we have worked very hard with students this year on understanding the importance of demonstrated interest at some colleges and the importance of meeting with those recruiters and making contacts. And the other tab up there that may not be quite as obvious is the mental health tab. Now, right now, if you look at our mental health tab, there are 2 resources there. One is the link to outside providers. So if you're looking for a counselor or therapist, you could click that and find out who they are in the area. And the second is a tool called 211, which I don't know if anybody's ever heard of, but it's a really good tool where you can put in whatever resource you need: food, clothing, housing, adaptive equipment, and put Nassau County, and it will provide a list of every single provider that offers that service. Now, I want to show you one more thing, and then we're going to look at some of the programming that has happened. So when you look at this slide, what I wanted people to know is that we are working in our department at providing a really professional, polished image. So we've worked on everything from the way that the office is designed and looked to every single letter, form, even our fax cover sheet was changed to make sure that when we are communicating with a college or a parent or an outside agency, an employer, that we are really presenting a polished image. And so on this slide, I just wanted to show you 2 examples of documents that have been completely redone. We've taken our school profile, and it now, I don't know, most people have probably not seen the old one, but it is significantly improved in something that we can really share with colleges and be proud of. When I mention the profile, I don't see her here, but I do want to thank Shelley Newman because we spent many hours designing the layout of this. And even when you look at the course offerings guide, which sometimes we are asked to send pages to NCAA or another agency, and even that's been redesigned to look much more professional. Now let's talk about programming. So we've increased communication, and now we're going to increase the programming that we do. Here's what I'll tell you about programming. When I started here last year, I would do an evening program, and I don't know if anybody went to one last year, and we would have maybe 20 people, 25 people. We have been doing programming this year, and I think some of our parents have been to some, and it has been standing room only where we have had to bring in chairs. And that tells me that we are either targeting the right programs or that we are developing a trust with our families and doing a much better job with the information we're sharing it and the way in which we are sharing it. So I am so excited about that. But up on the screen, I can tell you about programs, but I would really love for you to see some programs. And the best I can do are pictures. So my favorite event is Principal of the Day. I think that is so much fun. And when you look at the first picture, what our school counselors are doing at the middle school level is they are working with students on, we call it My First Resume, but that's not what we call it with students. They do early resumes, and they are given some information about what it's like to interview. And then we actually interview the students for Principal of the Day. Have to tell you, there's a lot of good candidates out there, and that's what the first picture is. So just an early introduction to what it's like to interview. In the second picture on the right, very early in the first month of school, our school counselors call in every freshman, and they meet in groups of 3 or 4, and that's Miss Fawcett meeting with her freshmen. We meet early just to kind of talk about what the program, said that wrong, sorry. We talk very early about what the counselor can offer in terms of services. And we also talk about the students' strengths, what questions they have, because we want to build a relationship with them early. And when we're doing this, we're only about week 2 or 3 into school. Now, on the bottom is a really fun activity that's mostly parents, I think, in that picture, where we play the GPA game. The GPA game is an admissions game, comes from the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, and they developed a game to kind of highlight what admissions committees look for. But rather than standing there and just talking about it, which can get kind of boring, especially when you're with students, what we do is everybody gets a GPA number, 4.0, 3.9, and it goes down in that way. And then we read criteria from colleges and the numbers shift. And it's interesting because as they make decisions, the person with the 4.0 doesn't always get in. And what kids always find interesting is that sometimes it's the person that might have a 3.0 that gets in. And why is that? The middle is just a social emotional program at the middle school where they're very active in Unity Day and trying to get students to interact with their fellow students who may not be like them or someone they have not met. And on the right is Ms. Gentile. All of our counselors do this, but we meet with all seniors at the beginning of the school year in a class, and we talk about what they need to do senior year, what those forms are, and what the process is. That's what she's doing there. All right, this is my shameless advertisement. I will do programming internally, but I also bring people in. So for anybody in the audience, January 15th, Rob Franick is coming, and we're doing the Best Fit College. And what I really like about Rob and what I'm excited about is he is the guy that produces all the Best Fit College books. So what better person to come in than the editor of all those books? He's been to hundreds of colleges to talk with students about selecting a college. So the ASCA model, in addition to pushing out programming, also says we have to be really integrally involved in the school and within the district. And to do that, that means a lot of collaboration. And right now, what we're looking at is collaboration between middle and between high school. And last year, we did some really neat programming that we had a really good time with. And I want to talk about that a little bit, and then we'll talk about some collaborations that are occurring in other disciplines, or with other disciplines. So when you look at this, it seems kind of silly. You see a picture of Mr. Shea there, and you see a little letter. And in the letter, it's really talking about advice to incoming freshmen, and a little bit about his background. And we did that because we thought in the past we would send letters home to 8th grade families, and it just simply said, "Welcome to high school, your counselor's Mr. Shea." Now, every counselor has their own version of this letter. And we said, you know what? 8th to 9th grade is such a critical transition for students. You can lose students in that transition. So very early, we wanted to create a feeling that the counselors were someone that they could rely on, someone that they could get to know. And so when we sent this letter, I was really happy to get back some really positive feedback from parents. One mother said her son was so excited because his counselor played basketball in college and he loves basketball. So we're making connections very early in a different way. Now, we did a lot more than that, and I'm not even going to be able to share the whole entire transition program, but I want to share 2 other highlights because they're new. So last year, our high school counselors went down and actually team taught with our 8th grade counselors. So instead of 8th grade counselors saying, well, I think high school is like, and a question might come up they couldn't necessarily answer about high school life, they did it together. And again, it was another interaction where our 8th graders saw the high school counselors before they ever came into the building. Now, one of my most favorite activities comes out of that transition meeting. And what we did was, traditionally, they come over, they took a tour, and I might, or the person in my role might talk to them, and then they'd kind of leave, and Mr. Cousins would talk to them. We thought, let's do something really different. So what we did was we played a game, and it was Guess the Counselor. And I did that for a couple reasons. One, they heard the counselor names, all of them, over and over and over and over again, so that they would learn them. And two, it also developed some comfort that even if their counselor wasn't there, and sometimes the counselor's out or in a meeting and something happens, and another counselor says, come on, you know, come with me. And they'll work together. So it develops not only a name recognition, but a trust in some of the other counselors and an awareness of who they are. So we played this game, and it was Guess the Counselor Who, and it would be silly facts. Who met Billy Joel? Who has 2 brothers named Bill? True story. And they would try to guess who the counselor is. And after they guessed who the counselor is, that counselor then facilitated a conversation between current students who were on the panel that you see in the front and the 8th graders. So we're looking very differently at student engagement through the activities and programs that we offer, and we're really striving for more of a personal connection with our students. Now that would be a counselor to counselor collaboration example. I want to share some other collaborations that are happening. Now, I said the counselors are involved everywhere. We are literally working with every discipline on something, and they're not even all listed up here. But I want to mention 3 because they're very new for us, and they're things that we really have enjoyed and are really excited about. So ask a model again, push out, don't wait for people to ask, and be equitable in all things that you do. So we reached out last year to our special education students that are placed in programs outside of North Shore, and we sent them a letter, and we sent them a little bio too, like, hey, you're our students too. If there's college and career assistance you need, you don't need to come and ask, which is what people were doing. We will offer it to you. Please just come in, and we will be happy to assist you. We've gotten some very good feedback on that. Something that is still so early in development, there's not a lot of details I can share, but we're working with Mr. Cousins, and we're working with the English department on the development of college camps. So we offer a lot of programming to our students. You saw the first 10 weeks of school. There have been other things since then. But is there a way that we can develop a camp-type activity during the day that all students can participate in at every single grade level, where we might even be able to offer a higher level of service? Still in development, but something we are really excited about. And we're also starting to work interdisciplinary. I really supervise counselors, but I work with social workers and nurses and psychologists. And we have an interdisciplinary committee that's also part of the strategic plan. And part of what this group is doing, one of its very first tasks, is to really work on what each role does. How can we clarify that for the public? Because sometimes people get confused about the different roles. And how can we develop a referral process for families and even within the building to help people know what discipline do you use or do you go to? And sometimes that's very individualized based on student need. So you saw the slide that talked about mental health in 211. Eventually, we'll be able to have something there that talks about this is what the social worker does versus psychologist, counselor, and kind of clarify like an internal process as well that we can put there on that link. Now, I told you we're on a journey, right? This is the part of the journey where you're like, I have to get out of the car. So, this is one of my favorite roadside attractions. We're going to take an exit for a minute, and then we're going to do some brain breaks. This looks like Stonehenge, but it actually is Foamhenge. And Foamhenge is an exact replica of Stonehenge, and it's a great place to take a brain break. So you don't have to do this with me, but I want to demonstrate 2 things that we teach our students to kind of help them center. And one of the things that we do is we do a very quick forced yawn. So anybody that wants to do it's welcome, but you don't have to. We teach them like raise your arms and force a yawn. So you would yawn, and once you force it, you end up yawning, right? And then you just go, did that feel good? And we would do that with students more than once. We might do that 2 or 3 times. And what we're really doing is helping to center them, helping them just to take a minute to say, wait a minute, how am I feeling internally? Is my face red? Is my stomach ill? Like, to help them learn self-regulation and coping techniques. Because the more self-regulation, the more coping techniques that they develop, the stronger they will be when they face something like a poor grade in college, or they might be faced with people offering substances or something. So the more we can teach them those skills, the stronger they will be as young adults and adults. Now here's another one that we do, and it's cross-body movement. So anybody that knows brain research or has looked at brain research, what we've learned is that when we cross left and right side, what happens is, and you can do your legs, you can do your arms, but we're going to do something more fun than that. When we cross left and right, what happens is both hemispheres turn on. And when they're both working together, we get much more creative problem solving. So the one our students like to do, and you don't have to do this, but it's fun. You make an L with both hands. The pointer comes to the thumb, and then the thumb comes to the pointer, and we walk it like Itsy Bitsy Spider. And we're turning on both parts of our brains. Now, the kids get really good at it. They can go really fast, but I'm not that coordinated. So as I go through the presentation and we start transitioning to curriculum, which is where we do a lot of the brain research and conversations with students, I wanted to just give you a chance to, when I work with elementary kids, I always say, get the wiggles out. We can get the wiggles out. So we're going to get back on the car, and now we're going to go back on the ramp to the ramp, which is what we're after. So I have to tell you, as I finish this up, if anybody's like yawning or doing Itsy Bitsy Spider, I'm going to choose to believe it's a brain break and not because it's boring. So let's talk a little bit about our curriculum. So I started very early saying that school counselors have counseling curriculum. Oh, maybe 8 years ago or so. In addition to the standards for academics, college and career, and some of the social emotional standards, they added standards called mindsets and behaviors. And there's no way I can show you all of our standards, so you're seeing just a very little snippet. Mindfulness is just understanding our feelings and the way our bodies feel when we're upset or anxious, being very present in the moment. Growth mindset standards are really the belief that I can, that if I work harder, if I try again, if I find a different way, if I persevere, then I can solve that math problem. So very open, positive mindset. So I want to show you some of the standards in action, but I also want to share with you that one of the things we're really working on is we have a curriculum crosswalk. So counselors are always looking for more time to get into classrooms. And what the crosswalk does is take the curriculum standards for counseling and overlaps them to other disciplines. And there's great opportunities there to look at where we're both teaching the same standard to maybe work together and do that a little bit differently. All right. Under our management system, we talked about being very purposeful and impactful with our time. So we don't do random acts of guidance anymore, and I wish I could share all of this with you. But what you're looking at here is both the middle school and the high school had conversations, and they talked about, we know what the end goal is, and we know what we need our students to know and understand and do, but we back that up and we looked at it 6/12, and we put in place what we should do each and every month to support our students to make sure that we reach the end goals. So we're really purposeful in that. When you actually look at the little bit that you can see, you'll notice that we are working in the model because we have curriculum for all as the foundation of our program, and then we have some individual supports and responsive services as well. So now I have some, if you like the last two activities, you'll like this. So one of the things our middle school counselors started to do is teach a new curriculum called Mind Up, and it's research-based. And what we like to teach our students to do, again, teaching them self-regulation, self-management, and part of that is understanding the brain and the function of the limbic system. So what we do with our students is we teach them to make the limbic system. So they put their hands up, and we fold our thumbs in, and then we put the fingers down, right? Now this is your limbic system. And what we teach our students is the fingers are the prefrontal cortex. So the front of my hand, the prefrontal cortex, that's where rational thought and problem solving and creative thinking comes from. Our amygdala, right here, that's fight, flight, or freeze. Now the interesting thing with the amygdala is it does not know anything other than that. It doesn't know a real threat from a perceived threat. It's going to always respond in that way. And then if you open up your palm, right here's your hippocampus, right? So when we are super stressed, super angry, feeling that we're losing control, we teach them you flip your lid, right? All right, now you flipped your lid, and what is left? Fight, flight, or freeze, right? And that's all it knows how to do. So we teach the kids that what you have to do is be able to use some of the techniques that we're teaching, brain breaks and other skills, and talk it back down so that your prefrontal cortex is back in control and you can rationally think and problem solve. They actually like that. And before I came here, we used to do that with our elementary kids. They couldn't say it, but they'd be like amygdala, and it was always pronounced wrong, but they knew what it was. But I want to tell you a funny story about that, because our students really have seemed to taken a liking to the curriculum. So Ms. Canzanera is one of our middle school counselors, and one of her students had to retake a test that she did not do very well. And she's sitting in Amy's office, and she's self-talking because she's in there alone with Amy. And she's telling herself, my amygdala's in control. I have to use my prefrontal cortex. It's in control. And literally use the techniques to talk herself and calm herself down, which I thought that was really cool, because they're applying their skills. That particular photo there, we have a brain, which it's green, and it really drives us crazy because it's the ugliest thing, and we pass that around. That's what that student's looking at in that picture. So if you look at this slide, you'll see a little bit more from that lesson where we teach them about the limbic system. And here are students just simply identifying the components of the system. We do not want our students to just memorize, but it was important that we knew that they understood it before we moved on, because we want to help them internalize it. So we do a couple other things as well. Now this is a student's glitter jar. I would not have made it this color, but so we use visuals. In this jar, even though it's a dark color, I can look through that, right? And I can think clearly, and I can make some good decisions. But when my amygdala takes over and I shake it up and it looks like this, and the glitter's all over, I no longer can see through that. I no longer can think clearly. So we give them visuals to help them. We also engage them in other activities. And one of them is, as a follow-up to this, is they do a skit where they're each a part of the brain. They're each shaking one portion of the limbic system. It's really fun to watch. And first you see how they interact when you flipped your lid. And that's always interesting to watch their perspective. But more importantly, they begin to identify their own self-regulation techniques and tools that work for them. So last up, I think, is some of the college and career readiness components that we've been working on. So a few things that we were really proud of is this year we did our first ever college fair with 8th grade through 12th grade. We did it during the day, and that afforded students an opportunity to interact with, I think we had 50 representatives here in the gym. But it was more than that. So before our students even went, the counselors went and talked to them about how do you interact with colleges, what might you want to say, and it was very developmentally appropriate, because with our 8th graders, we had a very different conversation than we would have with our juniors or our seniors that were very close to making decisions. We've also worked very hard with our students on increasing visits to college representatives in the office, as well as the schools coming in to visit within our office. So we were not seeing a lot of kids last fall. This fall, we do. And our reps, every single one have had, all but one, have had visitors with them. So that's just meaning, I think, that we're doing a better job at communicating why you need to meet with those representatives and what demonstrated interest is, and that can make a difference at some colleges. We also did a lot of work with Naviance, which is our college and career software program. And I want to show you some of the work that students produce in Naviance. Everybody knows they're going in to do college searches and career searches, but it really is so much more than that. At our middle school level, they do a lesson every year in Naviance, and this particular one happens to be goal setting. So we talk about the importance of setting goals. How do you set goals? What are realistic goals? This happens to be a student's goal where she's set both short and long-term goals for what does it look like at the end of middle and then later in high. And actually right through her final goal, I think, was to have a husband, kids, and a nice house and a dog, which I thought that was cute. But even though they're doing this or something like this every year in middle school, we also do it in high school. So in 9th grade, we do an activity called Strength Finders, and this is a portion of an actual student's report. I just took the name off. And Strength Finders is a great tool because what it identifies, unlike a lot of the career assessments, what it is what are you good at? So they begin to identify what their strengths are and what that means both when selecting a major, what that might mean for a counselor who really wants to work from a strength-based approach to know what the student's strengths are, and just reaffirming to a student to realize, you know, there are some things I'm really good at, and how do I use that to better myself? So we did this, and one student figured out, actually they couldn't figure out, they said, I'm not sure, I want to be a doctor, and it says I'm confident. I'm like, that's a good thing. If somebody's in my brain or in my heart, I want them to be confident and feel very secure in what they're doing. In 10th grade, we follow up and we do a different assessment with them, and this is the student report as well. We do an assessment called Do What You Are. And Do What You Are is a Myers-Briggs, and really it's how we perceive the world. So we help students to understand their own unique personality type and how that might relate to career. It actually relates to the relationships we have with people each and every day, including how we process information. Now, those are some things that a lot of people may not be aware of that are a little different than the traditional college and career search. We use all of these things in the course selection process as well. So this happens to be a worksheet in middle school. Middle school schedules a little differently than high school. So the counselors will push in and they'll actually talk about some of the assessments that students take and talk about what are you good at? What do you want to learn more about? What's something you want to grow in? And students kind of have that information and they're able to process it, take the worksheet with them so that when they're selecting courses and electives, they actually understand why they're choosing or what they may need to choose and the reasons for that. The high school course selection looks a little different. We don't give them a worksheet because they all meet individually with their counselor and they're able to say, my end goal is, how do I get there? And that's more of a conversation. We have been busy the last year and a half, but we're not done, and we know that we're not done, and we'll continue on the journey, and some of what we're working on next are actually up on this slide. We are going to continue to train in the ASCA national model. There are also new commissioners' regulations coming for the 1920 school year that talks about school counseling and several of these components like the development of an advisory committee that will come online this spring, the development of a comprehensive program, which is really based on the ASCA model, which we've already started, as well as continuing to support the strategic planning. So I thank you for your attention. It's been a good year. We've had fun. Are there any questions?
I'm sure there will be. Thank you so much. That was terrific. We'll take a moment. Thank you. People enjoy it. Thank you, guys. It was terrific. It was incredibly informative. Thank you for all the obvious work and effort that went into the presentation and, of course, into the actual work that you've accomplished over the course of the year. For my part, I just want to say it's so terrific to be in the position of being able to look forward and to focus on where we're going. Thank you for that. And I think the shift from the guidance counselor model to the school counselor model is just exactly what we've been talking about, and is a great way for us to frame these conversations and to start really looking at this whole K-12 spectrum. I am certain, nearly certain, that my fellow trustees must have some questions and some comments. I'll just point out that sometimes presentations like these trigger people to think of very specific examples, and let's just be cautious about not referring accidentally or otherwise to specific identifiable individuals, whether they be students or otherwise, while we're discussing this model, I'm telling my dear friends here. That being said, I open it up to questions or comments from the trustees. Shall I? I'll look this way first. Does anyone? Joanna, did you want?
Transformation's been just incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, and for all the work that you're doing. It's kind of amazing to me that you're able to do what you're doing within the confines of the time frames that you have with everything that's going on. I have a couple of questions. You had mentioned something to the effect that I think in the 10th grade you're administering the Myers-Briggs assessment to them. When are they doing this, and who's doing the analysis?
We do it in the spring, and we do it in usually an English or a social studies classroom, and the counselors will push in and they'll take the assessment. When we talked a little bit, and again, it's too early to know how this is all going to work out, but when we talked a little bit at the college camps, we actually wanted to expand upon that in some ways if we do bring college camps, but that's how we're doing it. We're pushing into classrooms.
Can I keep going, or do you want to?
No, please. That took a second, please. Thanks, Rich. Though.
Very, very different question. When the school counselors are making recommendations to students, particularly in the high school, about course selection, has there been any movement to have the counselors speak to the teachers prior to this? Because I know you have a detailed course catalog, but a lot of times it doesn't really give the essence of what's going on in a particular course. And I have to say, things are different now, but from my experience, that just never happened. It was, you know, people made judgments about things that were being done without really coming to the people who are in the trenches. Has there been more time or more effort spent in doing that?
So the way that process works is we're a self-selection school, so the teachers will make input, they'll give input. That is sent home, and the counselor has a copy of that as well. And then we use that in the advising meetings. Sometimes there is disagreement between what the input says, what the family or student might think. And in those cases, they go back and they do communicate that with the teacher. But that's pretty much how the process works. The teachers give their input, the counselors have that available at the meeting. And if there's any point that needs to be followed up on or there's uncertainty, they do communicate with the teacher individually, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, you have something?
Linda, thank you. It was really a very well thought out and well presented presentation for us. Thank you. I participated in that guidance review, so I knew a lot of the issues that were there, and I think you are accurate when you say that you exceeded so many of them. One of the big things that I remember from that was that previous iterations of the department had a lot of information, but it was available if you came and got it. And the push out you gave is really, really impressive to make sure you get those kids. So a couple questions on that front. And this is hard to do. I'm not sure if you have any ability to capture some data about how many more students we're seeing. Anecdotally, you had mentioned that I was at one of the presentations, and I happened to have another meeting, so I was standing by choice,
It was
but
standing
I had to
room
go by the
only,
door.
yes.
But people were everywhere. It was really very well attended, and the number of hits you had on the posted links. But I wonder if you have any data about that. And also, one of the issues that we discussed in relation to that, and in relation to the equity study that we spent a lot of time on, is how we specifically go after those populations that historically maybe first-generation college students or the other groups that we've identified that aren't necessarily finding the same degree of success in our school.
Right.
So two-part question.
So the data, we do have the data on the newsletter. One of my regrets is not doing a better job in terms of like attendance counts. So no, I did not take accounts of who attended presentations. I wish I did, because it would have been mind-blowing to look at where it was to where it is, but I did not. In terms of underrepresented populations, I do think that we're doing a better job with that, and one perfect example of that was last year when we did junior meetings with parents. If a parent called, if a student came in. So what we did this year is, it's going to take a tremendous amount of time because the meetings are so very long, but we're like, if we want to have a program for all, then that doesn't fly anymore. And every single junior will get a letter and an invite. Whether the parent comes or not, the counselor is prepared to spend that hour and a half and 2 hours to make sure that we are setting them up for success, because our first generation students really benefit from and need a little extra encouragement and assistance. I will also tell you that I sit on a national board. It's the NACX, so the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, and the board I sit on is Inclusion, Access, and Success. So when it comes to some inside information for what we need to do for first generation special education, our English language learners, we even have the benefit of having some of those tools that some of them are still yet in development, but we're able to use. So we're trying to do a better job there, yes.
That was something else that came out of that, which is, not that we're such a unicorn, but there are unique things going on at the school, and to have those colleges and universities understand what's unique about North Shore from the other lowercase North Shore schools against which we compete is important. So sitting on that NACAC board and that inclusion subcommittee, but also having 200 contacts of those colleges, that's really should be a feather in your cap that you were able to do that, because those relationships, I did that job, as you know, a long time ago. And knowing those schools and having that relationship gives our kids a leg up. Just one more question. The ASCA model seems like it has a lot of overlap with the SVOs, the shared values that we're doing in the district. I was wondering if you could just talk about that a little bit, and how that, is it a natural fit? Is it a shoehorn?
The ASCA model came about, I think, in 2002. And yes, there's a lot of alignment really with the equity and access. There's also a lot of alignment with the social emotional learning components. Yes. And a lot of it really comes from the mindsets and behaviors, that if you were to kind of go through the mindsets and behaviors, you would say in a lot of ways it connects to communicators. Our curriculum connects to problem solving. Some of that is by chance. Some of that is also very intentional. So one of the things that I'm really working with counselors on is really understanding where the district is going and how do we fit in that. Because if you look at the ASCA model, you're no longer a standalone program. You need to look at what's happening around you and what your district needs, and you need to find a way that your own program fits into that and aligns with that. Yes.
That makes sense.
A little bit of both.
Great. Thank you very much again.
Why don't you go in order?
Oh, okay.
By all means, easy enough.
There we go. Thank you, Linda. That was great. It really is amazing to see the development from the guidance review, which, thanks to Peter, I wasn't part of that project. It seemed like so long ago, but from the work plan and what you've done is pretty significant. I just have a couple of questions. What's our student counselor ratio now?
That should not be the hardest question of the night.
Do you think it's right for us, for North Shore High School?
I should know the counselor ratio off the top of my head, but honestly, I don't.
What are the national, best practice?
Best practice, ASCA tells you, is 250 to 1.
250, wow.
The national average is significantly more than that. We are very fortunate with our caseloads. We seem to be expanding program with the caseloads that we have. In some ways by being a little more creative about the work that we do and being a little more productive with our own time. And I think a lot of that's because we thought the program out in advance. So if we started September and we did not plan on meeting with our freshmen this year, then September gets crazy with all the individual things that come up. Like, they're legitimately really, really busy. But when we were very strategic and said we are going to carve out this time and we're going to meet with our freshmen, you know, it seems to work better that way. And that's the whole concept between the ASCA model and doing the planning ahead of time. Otherwise, you get lost in the details and things like that don't get done.
What's very apparent is the attention being paid to those transition waypoints. So between 5th and 6th, and 8th and 9th. And I have two questions. I know there was, and it was in the review about the difficulty of the 3 guidance counselors in the middle school, that at least, and it rotated through, one counselor each year would have the responsibility to work on the 5th to 6th transition and the 8th to 9th. Has there been any creative solution to giving them a little breather in that? I mean, they get 2 years to breathe and then they have to do it again. Has there been any, because I think that was noted in the original review as an area of challenge.
The model, there's different ways that you can run a middle school program. And we did look at, I know that the model talked about exploring different options, but as difficult as that might be to work on 5 and 8 at the same time, that seems to work the best for us because our counselors know their students really well. I think what has helped with that 8 to 9 transition is it no longer is the middle school counselor doing it all alone.
You guys have pushed down.
So the high school counselors have pushed down and helped. There are things that I've done for them administratively, or they now have some clerical support. So those kind of things have certainly helped and will help going forward to make that a little better. But it's just a tough job. But I will say they know their students so well, and that's the benefit of that 3-year with that grade level. And it also gives them, when we do it by grade level, it gives them the opportunity to interact with their team. Whereas if they had students from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they could never get to all the team meetings for each grade level. So it's just a better, even though it's difficult, cohesive model for students.
So now the second part of that question related to transition is how are we preparing our seniors for the transition to grown-up world? Specifically, self-advocacy, which hopefully we're helping them strengthen every year for a number of years, and specifically, but it applies to all those students with IEP plans and 504s. And 504s are a little less specific, but they're just as important because that's what the college considers. IEPs don't exist. And some parents are lost, and kids certainly are lost. It's a stressful situation given everything else they have to cope with when they land on campus. I know SEPTA provides a really wonderful program, and they've strengthened it over the past 2 years. Is that something you would collaborate with SEPTA on to be able to integrate it into your comprehensive service list? Is some sort of education for the seniors at a certain waypoint in the year?
That is something that we are working on. We've added a special ed tab on our webpage, but there's a lot more that needs to be put in there, so that is a work in progress. I've gone to SEPTA before. They've invited me at different times, but I will tell you that that is a growth area for us, and we had just talked about, when we talked about those college camps earlier that we haven't really developed, one of the things we really talked about was how can we set our seniors up for more success. How do they access services was one of those areas. Even financial literacy, that's what, when I did a senior survey last year, that was something that came up a lot, that they just don't really know. And now they're going to be in college, and some of them will be getting credit cards if they don't have them already. And, you know, they're going to be navigating that world. And a lot of students were saying we want help with that. So that is a growth area for us. That is something that we are really targeting and thinking about if we can bring these camps that we ourselves would like to strengthen, yes.
That's great. I have some more.
Okay.
I'm really glad to hear that you're going to expand that mental health tab, because it's so hard for so many parents and students to reach out as it is, unless they've already had they have good connections, or they're connected to people in the, whether it be a teacher, an aide, or someone that would help them walk into that counseling office and seek attention. And for our underrepresented populations, or just our English language learners, how are we pushing out to families, the students' families of origin, that English is not their first language, and maybe it's Spanish is their only language? How are we reaching out to that population of student?
So we do reach out in different ways. It tends to be more individual. So if we know that they need something in a different language, or they need an interpreter, we provide it. But what we're really working on and what we want to do is provide more documents in Spanish. And we have a few of them online that are in Spanish now. That is something we are going to have to just continually work on. But right now we handle it more on an individual basis, yes.
And the word DACA also gets me a little concerned about if there are students here that might have that concern as they're thinking about going onto
And Anna and the World Language Department, they have been doing a really good job we communicate frequently. So if something comes across their desk that they're concerned about from a parent or college admissions, we had one that was in distress, and we collaborated together. So it is more individual, but the work is still happening. I would just like it to be a little more pushed out to all equally from the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I just have a couple of questions.
Okay.
When counselors are meeting with students, I know they're talking a lot about courses that they're going to take or that they're taking. Are there discussions concerning the activities that they're involved in within the school? And I mean, are you finding a lot of kids who are not involved in school activities, and are there efforts to get them more actively engaged in the culture of the school?
I don't have the exact statistics. I know Albert shared them at the last meeting for the rate of involvement. I think that was one of your slides. It is a conversation that counselors have. So we were having a conversation with, or I was having a conversation with one of the counselors. The student was new, not acclimating well, and they were really out there trying to make connections with clubs and activities for the student. So it occurs on an individual basis, but it also occurs on a larger scale, because every single one of our students applying to college is going to need an activities resume. So we talk with students in groups about building the activity resume, and it's really the quality of the activities, not necessarily the quantity of the activities. So that occurs both in those small groups. It also may occur in an individual conversation, but we also see it with students that are really struggling to make connections within the school. And there was one that was an English language learner that the counselor noticed was really having a hard time making friends. And that's not a club activity, but it's about belonging in the school, and how she actually made connections with other kids, made sure that they were eating together and having conversations. So you still do see that, yes.
So, is there an activities fair or anything like that early in the year? Like, I know you have a college fair, but something that kids...
No, we don't host an activity fair, no.
Okay. And my other question, I'm a teacher in another district, and I'm just wondering if you're seeing increased incidents of stress and anxiety among students, and are there certain things that are being done to address that if that's what's being seen?
So here and nationally, there's increase not only in stress and anxiety, but in traumatic exposure, which can lead to some stress and anxiety. That's true here, that's true nationally, yes. what we're trying to do through our middle school curriculum, and we have not yet developed a curriculum the way that we have our middle school one running yet, but we're teaching them how to control that stress and anxiety. How do you recognize it? How do you control it? So a really good example was that student taking the test who was really stressed out, who had realized like, oh, that's my amygdala, and what are the techniques I use to control that? So that is a very big focus of our middle school curriculum.
Okay.
And the nice thing about that is the high school, we meet as a department, which I'm not sure if they had done that in the past, but we meet as a department. Middle school had shared, this is the curriculum we're doing, these are some of our activities. And at some point this spring, we'll be bringing the high school counselors actually down there to see it, so that when the 8th graders come over, we can use the same language and they have a better understanding of what they went through as well and what they know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening.
Hello.
So thank you very much for the report. I had requested the guidance review, so I'm really gratified to see that, you know, those recommendations are being implemented. So thank you very much for your hard work in that area. One of the things that I think I'm most pleased to see is the integration between the high school counselors and the middle school counselors. There was a bit of a debate with the board about pushing down, and I don't think pushing down needs to necessarily mean creating stress, but you know, information is power.
Right.
So I'm wondering, when you go down into the middle school and you're talking about course choice, course selection, and what kind of activities they're going to be engaged in and all that, do you talk about things such as keeping a portfolio if you're going into a fine and performing arts, or if you plan on doing, if you would like to do athletics in college, what you need to do, you know, do you have some specific information that you share at the middle school level in an informatory manner rather than a stressful manner? Because I think it's important. Kids don't know that they need, if they're going to be applying, that they need a portfolio per se. Let's say if they're applying to a fine arts program.
So when we work with our 8th graders, you're right, we keep it developmentally appropriate. They're not applying next year. We don't need to create that level of stress. So a lot of the work that we do with them is about understanding yourself, understanding what you're good at, understanding that you have choices and options. And a lot of what we do, we frame in that context. So when they went to the college fair, you know, with our juniors, our conversation's very different. When our 8th graders went, we talked about there are a lot of different colleges out there, and how do you find the best fit for you versus what SAT score do you need, and something that would create that level of stress. We really start talking about building resumes when they get to 9th grade. But we do quite a bit of work at the 8th grade level in terms of preparing them for what they'll be doing as they hit 9th grade, without talking about the actual doing of it now.
Okay, because I think sometimes there is, especially if it's your first child, you don't understand that the choices that they make curriculum-wise when they're going from 8th to 9th will impact them down the road, and what they may need to save from what they've done.
Right.
The other information I did actually go on the website when this came up before the presentation came out, and the information marked, you know, 9th grade, 10th grade, all of that. I think some of that information that you're maybe giving in 10th grade really needs to be given earlier in 9th grade. You know, things about whether you want to take subject matter tests, preparing the summer between 10th grade and 11th grade for the PSAT, because I think a lot of people are unaware that determines national merit scholars.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you can think about a way, rather than necessarily siloing that information, to maybe have it cross-reference and not just leave it up to the individual to decide that they're ready to look at what's going on in 10th grade or 11th grade. I think some of the information still needs to be pushed down further, not to stress kids out, but to afford children opportunities that they may foreclose themselves to due to lack of information.
So before I forget, talking with the students about options, whether it's college or course selection, looks a little different than when we talk to the parents. So one of the workshops, it was the one that you referenced, one of our workshops, we did a college admissions kind of boot camp. I think it was actually for the PTO. I think they called it College for Dummies. It had a different title. Or College 101. I can't remember what it was called, but we invited parents from 8th grade. Actually, we invited anybody in middle school to high school, and it was very well attended. And what we really did is paint the picture as a whole picture, so that even though you're there and your child's an 8th grader, it doesn't mean they're going to apply next year, but we want you to see what it looks like all the way through. So with the parents, we do a lot of that. But you're right, we do try to protect the students a little bit from the pressure of feeling like I have to do this now in 8th grade. We can certainly look at the timeline. Once I get the junior one done, we can actually offer both options. You can look by what traditionally happens in 10th grade, but if you want to look at the whole picture, that's easily done. I just have to finish the last grade.
And one of the other things is the college essay. So I was also the one who recommended the Writing Center, and I know that's been great with offering, SAT and college essay writing. But there was a college application essay class that was offered, a boot camp, I think that was offered in junior year. I would encourage that to be done in sophomore year, so the kids can work on it in the summer, or open to sophomores. Sophomores encouraged on that, so they're not feeling the pressure of the heavy coursework in junior year and trying to get that college essay done. And the other thing is that there are SAT class and ACT prep classes, but they're in the community ed.
Right.
And unless you know they're there or looking through it, you don't know they're there.
Right.
I was wondering if there's any consideration given to offering, as in some high schools, an SAT or ACT review class as maybe even a half-year elective option in the high school.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that, since that's not my area in terms of the development of new courses or the assignment of teachers. But I can certainly share your suggestions in terms of the essay writing with our English chair. I do know that they've done a really good job at doing some essay writing as part of the English curriculum now in junior year, rather than the fall of senior year, just to accommodate the fact that the Common App prompts come out. They're actually out now. They come out in January. And students can work on that before even leaving for summer at the end of that junior year.
Right. I misspoke. I meant the junior year doing the boot camp rather than it was in senior year that it was offered.
Yes.
Going back.
Yes.
I'm messing up my date. Sorry.
That's
But
okay.
yeah.
And they have done that now, and they are actually doing that junior year, which is really good.
Because it was traditionally done senior year.
Yes, you're right. It was the first year, I believe. I
The
was
first,
there.
yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Naomi?
Yeah, I just want to, first of all, thank you, Linda. I know firsthand all the great work that you've been doing, so you've done a phenomenal job, and I thank you for that on behalf of our kids and the parents in the district. I want to highlight two things because it's come up several times with board members. Two things that Linda's been working on. If you remember one of the slides where one of the areas she's working in is interdisciplinary connections with other departments. One is with the English department, and Linda alluded to this. Not only is there a unit taught, I think it's toward the beginning of the junior year, although Albert, you could correct me on that, about college essay writing. In addition to that, the English department has created a very extensive college essay, I'll call it a booklet.
Booklet,
like
yeah.
60, 30, 40 pages of guiding students through that whole process, which is a really phenomenal publication that's been put together. I know it was probably the year that you came or the year right before you came, and they've been working together. We're at the meetings that you're having with students. They're actually distributing that booklet to each of the kids in junior year, is it? Or the
In
kids
junior year at the
in
junior
year.
conferences, yes.
The other point of interdisciplinary work that Linda's been doing is with Anna Aguiar, and several of you had asked the question about E&L students and the support given to them. Anna receives excuse me, funding through Title III grant money, and she had gone to the E&L teachers and asked, we've got this money to support students and their families. What could we do with it? What would you recommend? What would be helpful to the students that you service? And they really strongly recommended providing counseling services in the home language of the students. And she and Linda have been working together to find organizations. I know our attorney's looking at some potential agreements to provide those services and using that money toward that end. The unfortunate thing is those services are difficult to find in all the languages in our district that may need them. But one organization, I think, provides it extensively in the Spanish language. I'm not sure, again, where that's at, but Linda's been working with Anna Aguiar with that.
Yes. It is remarkably late at this point. There are some people here who have some time-sensitive issues still pressing this evening. So I want to propose that we conclude our discussion of guidance. I'd like to make a motion that we postpone the PSA testing update with the caveat that Dr. Giarrizzo will provide us with some interim information that he has. Is that
Yes.
appropriate?
That's fair.
And of course, we didn't give you a chance to have any final comments here, so we'll let you do that.
Okay.
And would you guys, sure, you want me to make it's on the agenda. So I'm going to make a motion to postpone the PSAT testing update to a future meeting. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you. All in favor? Okay, thank you. But let me give you the floor if you have.
So I just, you know, to reiterate what everybody has said here, that, and I see you pretty regularly, the lifting that needed to be done in this area of the organization was so substantial. And you and I, you were actually here a couple of months longer than I am here, right? And so we both knew coming in that this was an area that really needed, you know, intensive focus and attention. And you haven't lost you probably have lost a few nights' sleep along the way, but you haven't skipped a beat, and the program is markedly improved by every measure. And I know that you haven't done that alone. So I want, you know, you and your counselors to know how appreciative I am of that hard work and how you really challenged people who have been at this for a little while here to examine their practices and really get on a path of continuous improvement. So we're not where we probably ought to be, but we are well on that path, and I want to thank you so much. You have served us so well here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
So PSATs. So just to, the board had asked us to, I had sent the board some information
We are
on
postponing it, yes.
PSATs. We're postponing it. We did some research on the pros and the cons of keeping it during the day for sophomores and juniors versus on the weekend. And so we're prepared to give you some financial analysis, some program analysis. Due to the timing of this, we'll kick this out. But just so I know, some of the couple of quick, something quick I can give to the board is that, believe it or not, it is actually less expensive for us to administer it during the week we don't have all the costs for proctors. So while we pay for the cost of the testing, which roughly costs $6,800, $7,000, for us to fund the proctoring costs over the weekend runs well over $10,000. So
The bizarre advantages of living in a high-cost state.
imagine that.
It's interesting.
So, so there's that. So we have some thoughts about how we can do this moving forward. The net of this is we think that we would like to give some serious consideration to leaving. Originally, we had given some consideration to putting it on the weekend. Setting the financial considerations aside, we would really like to spend some time thinking about how that time can be used very well with kids, so that it's an opportunity for us. So it's not a day of lost instruction, but it's really an opportunity for us to do things in a different way with kids that we wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity to do here. So, in light of the couple of weeks that we'll have to think that through, we can probably bring the board something a little bit more refined in terms of a recommendation.
Terrific.
Okay?
Thank you.
Is that fairly yes? Okay. Rob, anything to add to that? Okay, very
Okay.
good. All right, thank you.
All right, till next time on that then. The moment you've all been waiting for. It is time for comments from the public. If you would like to address the board, please come to the podium and give us your name, town of residence, and we're happy to hear what you have to share.
Rob Mazzeller again,
Hi,
Glen
Rob.
Head. Just a question, with the expansion of the school counselors into the mental health arena, how do we make sure, I guess, the children of various ages understand what the differences in terms of expectations of confidentiality are between a school counselor, a social worker, and a psychologist? And are there any potential HIPAA concerns with the expansion into that arena?
No. No, I don't think so, Rob. Right. So the student has to be informed of the confidentiality and all that, but student to parent, there aren't concerns about that. Okay.
Other comments from the public? Because we have some very routine contracts to approve. Okay, public comment is concluded. Thank you. We will move on. Action item C is personnel. Do I have a motion? Motion. Do I have a second? All in favor? Thank you. We'll move on to action item D, which is acceptance of a donation from the Glenwood Landing SCA to the Glenwood Landing School, value of $7,500 for their outdoor classroom. Do I have a motion? Motion. A second? Second. First comment would be, of course, thank you. Greatly appreciated. And any other comments? All in favor? Action item E, acceptance of donation to North Shore Schools Fine and Performing Arts. Arts Angels is donating $1,281 for the purchase of a set of low octave something for the high school band, and 4 straight peg chairs to the theater program. I don't know how to say it over this.
Nor do I. Please don't make me go there.
Is there a motion?
Motion?
Is there a second? Is there any further discussion of pronunciation or other issues? A heartfelt thanks to the Arts Angels once again. All in favor? Thank you. Action F is approval of the budget transfers. Do I have a motion?
Motion?
Second? Yes, there was one. Questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you. I'll combine actions G and H. The approval agreement between North Shore and the Family Pediatric Home Care and Bayada Home Health Care, Inc. Do I have a motion?
Motion?
A second? Second. All in, questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you. Action I is our last set of contracts that covers 12 special education service contracts. Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second?
Do we have questions and comments? All in favor? Thank you, trustees. Unbelievably, discussion number 8 is comments from the public. Who writes these? Are there any comments from the public? If so, please address.
You're the public.
Please come to the podium. Okay, I'm closing public comment. Discussion 9 is old business. I will point out, I believe Dr. Giarrizzo discussed the reserve fund document that we'd received earlier and indicated if anyone had any further discussion of that before it was posted online, that should come now. Is there any further discussion of the reserve fund document?
No, I thought it was great.
Thank you for, thank you.
It's helpful to me,
Olivia,
yeah.
for putting together a really great, comprehensive
Olivia did that.
document. We know we know what's happening here. Thank you.
Thank
Put
you,
it out.
Olivia.
Thank you, Olivia. And James.
It's so tempting to wish they could be grouped together to maximize saving rates and offset the TANs, but
They can't.
they can't.
Good times.
But they look at it before they, I mean, you need to have that kind of balances to help you to lower your saving, your borrowing costs.
I guess that's true. I'll guess you just told us, but that's good to know.
Okay, so we'll post that tomorrow then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other
You're
old
welcome.
business. No one can even summon the stream. All right, moving on to new business. For some reason, I had a point of new business, which was I wanted to point out that NISBA had emailed us all an advocacy update. There are 5 points on the APPR proposal. I thought was interesting, and I thought you should look at it, and it's possible that at some point we should discuss lack in advocacy, but they send out a lot of things, and in case you missed it, I won't go into further detail. Other new business?
Nope.
No. Somehow, things really,
Slow uphill, but
yeah,
very
just,
quick.
yeah, back on the backside of this. All right, motion to adjourn?
Motion?
Second? All in favor? Come on, guys, we can do it. Thank you all.